Hello, everyone, and welcome to Unregulated Leadership. I am Latoya Douglas, and we also have Latoya Johnson, and we are your hosts. And we also have our special guest today, and I'm so excited. We have Dr. Cort, and we have Kevin and Narine, who are in my a part of my Immersion course. I am currently in the African Caribbean mental health concentration, and so I wanted to bring them here to kind of bridge the connection between leadership and culture and the things that I've been learning, and it's so exciting. So, Dr. Cort and Kevin, if you guys can introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. I am Dr. Natalie Cort. I'm an associate professor in the clinical psychology program at William James College. I also have the honor of being the co-director of the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health. And that center is really quite relevant because it houses 4 academic concentrations to which the international immersion programs are tied. So as a part of the center, we have an Asian mental health program, African and Caribbean mental health program, Latino mental health program, and a global mental health program that focuses on giving students the opportunity to become specialists in working with immigrants and refugees. So as a function of that work, we also provide students in those concentrations opportunities to do work on a global scale. Our mission in the center is to really focus on issues of mental health disparities locally, nationally, and globally. And we recognize that our students are global citizens. So we, before COVID, took students annually to Ecuador, Kenya, Trinidad, Guyana, we've added Vietnam, and Haiti also. And in those countries, we would do a variety of different mental health work. For the Guyana Service Learning and Immersion program, which is one of our immersion programs, our work tends to focus on suicide. And I am so pleased that this year, even though we weren't able to go to Guyana, we are still able to hold the class, focusing on Guyana, focusing on suicide in Guyana. And Kevin Narine, who is Guyanese, like myself, was a significant student leader. Kevin is also the student administrator, research administrator for the Center for Multicultural and Global Mental Health. So Kevin, please turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Cort, and thank you, Lavanya and Latoya, for welcoming us to the show. I'm Kevin Narine, as Dr. Cort mentioned. I'm a rising third-year student in the clinical PsyD program. I am specializing in Asian mental health, and my clinical and research interests are primarily on culturally sensitive and tailored treatments for anxiety and trauma-related conditions, and suicide prevention, which I got more involved with while working with Dr. Cort, especially with other Guyanese communities across the world. So thank you both for welcoming us in here today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. So for listeners who have tuned into previous shows, you've heard Lavanya talk about her experience and how her the immersion course has really lent to her looking at organizational leadership in a different way. As you all are thinking about culture and the level of cultural competency that we all should be coming to work with these days, can we talk about that just for a little bit? What that means, cultural competency, and how it shows up or maybe doesn't show up in the workplace?
Hey, wow, that's huge. So a term that I use instead of cultural competence is cultural humility, and that really references the realization that culture. I mean, it's a tiny word that is huge and complex and dynamic. So culture, as we think of it in terms of values, traditions, et cetera, that are intergenerationally passed, it's always changing. There are always changes to our cultural understanding. And so with cultural humility, that requires us to have that recognition that we're engaging in a lifelong journey of continually learning about ourselves and learning about other people. So that means that we have to be curious, really be interested in others as well as ourselves. It also highlights the fact that we need to be able to recognize that there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know about the incredibly diverse world that we live in. And that's okay. That's not something to be threatened by, but something to actually be excited about and embrace the fact that you always get a chance to not be bored, because there's always something new to learn from yourself and from the people that you encounter. So cultural humility, because it really emphasizes this exciting process of continual growth and continual knowledge, is one that I think for me fits better. In the clinical psychology world, we are new to cultural humility. The American Psychological Association has for more than a decade highlighted to us in the field how necessary it is to focus in on the ways in which our perspectives about mental health, our perspectives about treatment are impacted and influenced by our cultural identity. Really, I think George Floyd, his legacy is so vast, but one of his legacy is that there's been much more intentional attention to focusing on this area in ways that I have never seen in the field of clinical psychology. So there's been much more thought about the ways in which our field has been largely an ethnocentric one and a monoculturalistic one, and how devastatingly limiting that has been for the majority of the world, who are not white, who are not male, who are not cisgender, who are not only of one religious faith. So there's been a sea change in the last 2 to 3 years around this area for the first time in my experience as a clinical psychologist.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, if I could tag on to that amazing response to what cultural humility means, I really appreciated your response, Dr. Cort, with seeing cultural humility as an ongoing process, whereas cultural competency we can see as a destination, something to check off. But cultural humility is ongoing. It's that ongoing learning, self-reflection, challenging power dynamics in our relationships and in our own institutions. So it requires that ongoing and sustained motivation in us to keep learning and growing and challenging. And in terms of, taking this cultural immersion course that focused on suicide prevention in Guyana, I was learning how to engage in cultural humility, especially a community that I'm a part of. And one example could be, recognizing how there was a lot of shame attached to broken English or Creole Guyanese English, which is what Guyanese speak. Creole Guyanese English is just a fusion of various types of languages, including British English, Portuguese, other types of dialects that come along with being in a multicultural setting. And, growing up in the Bronx, I used to be so ashamed of speaking Creole Guyanese. It would be seen as this lesser form of English. And over time, I would stop speaking it and would try to veer towards, speaking more proper American English. And it's those experiences that really make me think about this power dynamic in which we might look down upon somebody for not speaking 100% fluent American English, or what we consider as being the prototypical form of English. And recognizing that in our own dynamics, if we're working with a Guyanese client, and being able to acknowledge if we're experiencing some form of discomfort there.
Mm.
Is there a sense that this person is less than me because they don't speak the same English as me? Is there a prototypical or better form of English? And how is that even hegemonical in some ways? So that's where cultural humility can even show up in our own interactions with Guyanese clients or workers in our settings. And it's important to acknowledge.
I love the concept of cultural humility because it's I almost feel it, right? And when you say cultural competence, it's like you said, it's almost a thing that you have, and then that's it. But humility is like something that is always ongoing, even if it's not, we're not talking about culture, we're just talking about ourselves. It's something that you consistently have to do, right? Like you consistently have to show up in this humble space. So I love that. You both kind of mentioned the workshop, the suicide workshop that we did that was absolutely amazing. It was the first time that I was did such a like a kind of international thing, which was like, oh my God, this is so great. Like, and then you like just it was so many different moving parts. And it was different than you had ever done before. So can you talk a little bit about how the workshop kind of came to be in this virtual space and how you used to do it before, and then just kind of the impact that it was able to have, even though like your presence wasn't there? Because sometimes we think if we can't do things the way we used to do it, then we just can't do it at all. I know I said a lot just now, so but whatever you want to like touch on about the workshop and just the impact that it had.
Sure. Oh my goodness. What an experience this workshop was this year. So the Guyana Service Learning and Cultural Immersion program started back in 2016. And the first group of students and I went to Guyana in 2017. So the way in which the immersion programs work, we build partnership with leaders on the ground, with stakeholders on the ground in whatever country. And so it's really a community-based participatory process where, you know, instead of us coming from the United States and deciding, okay, this is what we want to focus on, we rely on the relationships we have with our partners to determine what they think is most relevant, what aspects of our training, our expertise would be useful for them. And we were told, you know, when we were beginning the program, that suicide was a significant issue, and there was little leadership in the country at a federal level, at a governmental level, around dealing with the high rate of suicide. So Guyana, in 2022, we're in, as the second highest rate of suicide in the entire world. And for the last decade, that's been consistent. It's been either number one, number two, number three, or number four in the world. So, which is devastating as somebody who loves Guyana, coming from that country, to know that so many people are suffering, so many people are in pain and not finding a way to get support. So our partners on the ground highlighted that this is the issue that they wanted us to focus our attention on. So we developed the Guyana Suicide Prevention Gatekeeper training, utilizing a number of existing evidence-based gatekeeper trainings here in the US. But also, obviously, we really needed to make sure that there was a significant cultural component, because yes, suicide happens across the world, but in each place, each location, each country, there's unique flavor to the experiences that people are having. So it was really necessary for us to work closely with our partners to really ascertain what we needed to do differently to make sure that the workshop was as relevant to people's lives as possible. So we've hosted the workshop in person in Guyana. We usually hosted it for 2 or 3 days. And that has been such an incredibly rewarding experience to see people pile in to a relatively tiny room with no air conditioning. Guyana is a very hot tropical country. No air conditioning, just fans that are moving hot air around. To see the Guyanese people be so committed to wanting to deal with suicide that they would commit to 8 hours a day, talking about this really tragic occurrence, right? Just made me so proud of my people. And so COVID happens and all of our international immersion programs stop. We can't travel. And I read an article in one of the Guyanese newspaper earlier this year highlighting the fact that the suicide rate had increased yet again after coming down in 2019. And the article talked about the fact that there had been, I think, 35 suicide attempts in the first half of the year, and half of the individuals who attempted suicide were young girls. And that just, I don't know, that just connected to me in a way. So, so my colleagues and I made a decision that this year we were going to do our best to recreate some aspect of immersion for our students. So my colleagues, Dr. Joel Bloom, who usually travels to Haiti, instead created a local immersion program with the Haitian community. Dr. Mari Benassar, who usually takes students to Ecuador, connected to 2 local agencies that provide services to the Latino mental health community, the Latino community, and created a local immersion. For me, there's not a huge Guyanese population in Massachusetts. There's not like a Guyanese agency. So that left it, question mark. Well, how do we do this? Given that we can't do a local immersion, so to speak. So Zoom, as we are sitting here now, made the most sense. And that was really anxiety provoking. Guyana has a lot of blackouts, a lot of loss of electricity. Getting Wi-Fi service is not as easily accessible as it is here. Last year, I actually did a workshop via Zoom for the Methodist Church in Guyana. It went well, but there were definitely some kinks to the situation. So the idea of then trying to do a workshop that's usually at least 16 hours by Zoom, given these factors that exist, was really anxiety provoking. And that's where, Kevin, who is a very calm person, I tell him that he lowers my blood pressure. Listening to him talk lowers my blood pressure, came in. And so for me, having an opportunity, not only because Kevin is Guyanese, but he's also brilliant and a brilliant student leader. He also happens to be a CMGMH scholarship fellow. Having him to kind of bounce ideas off and, talk about my anxieties, and he is good with solutions to things. So that I think for me, the partnership with Kevin was really helpful in realizing this opportunity, and having this actually be manifested. And he can share the number of ways in which his involvement allowed for this workshop to be successful, including start creating a website for us. So yeah, Kevin, your thoughts?
Thank you, Dr. Cort. And I also just want to say, Dr. Cort is one of the main reasons why I joined the WJC community, is her leadership in spearheading initiatives like this type of immersion program. and efforts to reduce inequities across the world, especially in our own shared community. So I really just want to highlight how amazing she is and how bold and passionate she is with things that really matter to her. And it's hard to find mentors and advisors who really carry that sense of humility and passion within them. So I'm very lucky to be working with her and was lucky to work with her on this initiative. It was amazing. It was challenging at times to really, piece together how do we turn something that was in person into this virtual format. And, 1 year ago, I was looking back at some of my calendar events, and 1 year ago, we met with somebody named Anu Aznani, who was a former mentor of mine in undergraduate, in my undergraduate training, and she had done some workshops in St. Lucia. She did some trauma workshops in St. Lucia and had recently published some work on how to basically do this workshop via virtual format, and some of the barriers that would come up, as well as feedback from attendees, which was really important for us to see and hear in terms of how we can adjust some of the recommendations and suggestions that she's learned to this virtual format for Guyana. So it was really wonderful even meeting with her to understand that there are models out there that this can be done with larger audience members, despite some of the barriers that Dr. Cort mentioned, like even having a computer can be a barrier, and we don't usually think about some of these things. So, even growing up on the island of Wakanam, computers are really sparse. I'm sure it has changed over time, but not everybody has a phone or a computer that's accessible to really get these types of training. So it's really important for us to think about some of these things. And Dr. Cort was just amazing in listening to not just me, but the classmates, including Lavanya and others, in incorporating their voice to make this as effective as it could be. I think a really good example is, using polls to collect voices and understand what the audience knows, where they're at currently. And I think that was really helpful. We couldn't get individual people to all verbally say their response to each question. That would have been too time consuming with over 200 attendees. So it was really important for us to be creative in the ways that we were able to collate voices, organize it, and really create discussions and connect folks. And even using the chat functionality, creating a website to house resources that's accessible. So even if folks weren't able to attend the workshop, they can always connect others who didn't attend to these resources. Some of them included hotline links so that if they needed support, like mental health support, they can reach out to some of these contacts. Dr. Cort worked with folks on the ground in Guyana, in the US, to really bridge some of these important resources. So it was a lot of challenges that came up, but we were able to really brainstorm together solutions that have a big impact.
I want to talk a little bit about the impact, like you just said, right? Because even, sometimes you go to church and they be like, it's 1,000 y'all in here, but if it's just that one, if I just touch that one, right? And so even, each day, there was someone that was like, I've been thinking about suicide, or my cousin, or, different people in the moment were having these thoughts. And in the moment, that workshop was able to impact their lives in a positive way that if we hadn't done it, it wouldn't have, right? And then some people came together in large groups and watched it and listened. It was just watching some of this stuff happen, and Dr. Cort, your family being there, supporting what you were doing. It was amazing to see, but it reminds us, even all the work that goes into it, the impact that you're having internationally from the US, right? Because there was a vision and you worked that vision. Even though you knew there would be some challenges, you still did it. And you had this positive impact on all these different people, including the people that were participating in it, right? Because, one time we did something where people were typing names of people that they had lost and remembering the positive things about them. And it's just even for us, it's like, wow, like we're here, we're reflecting on the positive people in our lives and the impact that we have. So if you could talk a little bit about, the things that we may not have known of the impact that happened during those few days.
Sure. Yeah. As you know, it's the three of us. Yes, we were a part of it, but we were part of a larger team of really amazing individuals, including a number of WJC students. So one of the things that when on the ground in Guyana and running this workshop, we realized very quickly, because suicide is so prevalent, and obviously depression, which is the primary driver, major depression, primary driver of suicide. When you get any large group of people together, Guyanese together, more than likely you're going to have a significant number of individuals in that group who themselves even either are currently considering suicide or have in the past considered or even attempted. So that was also part of the concern, part of the issues that, Kevin and I spoke about, and myself and my colleagues. How do you do this? How do you run a suicide workshop when in person there are oftentimes people who are considering, and we've definitely had people who would approach us at the end of workshops to say, I'm thinking about killing myself and I don't know what to do. So that was an anxiety situation to figure out, how do you do this? So luckily we were able to reach out to a number of WJC students who were willing to generously give of their time as well as their expertise to serve as designated support people. And they did a fantastic job of being responsive to individuals who were thinking about suicide, who were struggling with deep emotions, who were parents who were doing their best to keep children who were at risk of suicide. So we also had a number of moderators who themselves would scour the chat box to note if there was anybody who was sharing that they were having a tough time, that the conversation had triggered sadness or worry or anxiety. And the moderators would make sure that the support people were made aware that, hey, you should contact this person and check in with them. So, I'm so grateful. It felt like the group that came together to be a part of this, that it was meant to happen, that it was the right group of people coming together to do this work in a way that for me felt a bit spiritual, because you're dealing with life, you're dealing with loss, and the students who were the support people, Matt Eisner, Dolores Sutton, Shob Agarwala, were just so kind, and created safe spaces, which is tough to do when you're doing a suicide assessment via chat box, right? But because of who they are and the level of empathy that they hold, as well as how seriously they took this role, they made a difference. They did make a difference. And so I'm so incredibly grateful, because I know that they were able to hold and validate people who were in incredible pain. And they made sure that they felt in those moments less alone, less isolated. And that's everything.
Mm-hmm.
I hear you talking about the emotion and heaviness of such a needed and yet taxing topic. And I'm wondering how you take care of yourself. I'm wondering how you take care of yourself as people who are helpers, right? Sometimes we get lost and we are giving, and we forget to refill our own tanks. And so I'm wondering how you recharge after such an important and impactful experience.
Such a great question. And I think, today I was reading some emails, and in somebody's signature, they put this lovely quote that really connected with some of my values around compassion. And the quote was, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is not complete," by Jack Cornfield. And I really found that to be an amazing quote that really connects with the value of the folks participating or leading this workshop, is the compassion they have to change an inequity in the world, especially in Guyana, with one of the highest rates of suicide in the world. And with that leadership can come immense forms of discomfort and pain as you see people suffer or share that they are currently suffering. And it can leave us feeling helpless at times, especially being at a remote distance where we can only do so much depending on our own skills, our year of training, our distance, and what we have available as resources. And it was important for me personally to check in with other folks. So, even checking in with Dr. Cort, or having an hour after this workshop to process our experiences as a team, was really helpful to know that I'm not alone in this. Like, this is really important to me, but it's also important to everybody else here. And we're all here to support each other to carry this workshop through, to hold space for each other, especially during uncomfortable times. And that in itself was really powerful to see. We are extending compassion to a community across the world, but we can also extend it to ourselves and our team. And I know we have a lot of organizational psychology folks here, so I don't need to talk about why that's important as a team. But it really made a huge difference for me to know that this was not something I was doing alone, that I have support here and people who really care about addressing inequity.
Good. It was an interesting experience having run this workshop in person with WJC students in person, and then doing it virtually. What I found was that because we were all in our silos, we're all working in our own homes, we would come together for Zoom meetings, etc. But I think I shared with the group that one day I was working on the PowerPoint slides and I just became tearful. And like, what is happening? Why is my face wet? And it kind of clicked. Like, wait a second, you're spending hours and hours, thinking and about suicide, thinking about the tragedy of 10-year-olds and 15-year-olds and the entire family who've disappeared, and just the incredible ripple effect and the loss that incurs never gets really resolved for many. So of course you're feeling sad, right? But I wasn't, it was interesting because it's not an experience that I had in the international trips. And I think because we were working separately, right? We weren't together physically for 10 days as we are in Guyana. There was something isolating about that made the experienced the emotions of this work much more intense for me than I had noticed before. And we did a check-in with everybody the next time we met, and that was so enriching, because it turned out that many of us have our own suicide stories, right? Our own experiences where suicide has touched our lives in some way. And so that was important for us to talk about those personal pieces of ourselves that absolutely was being affected and even triggered by this work. So it wasn't emotionless. It wasn't just an intellectual pursuit. It was personal for most of us, right? But the question on self-care, I as I was saying before, like, I felt so grateful for the group of human beings, the souls that came together, because I would leave, spending 4 hours with them on a Sunday or whatever it was, and feel so uplifted, because it felt like we were seamless, right? I would pose a question, something that I was worrying about and unsure about, and then Lavanya would come up with some fantastic suggestion on how to deal with it, or Olivia or Erica would have an idea, Kevin would have a suggestion, so there was a way in which everybody, I felt, had an opportunity to share their perspectives and shape this process. So I'm really, really, really grateful that, Christine, who's also a part of this group too, came together. So I felt, in terms of self-care, that the group of people that we had, who have such great sense of humor, which is such an important aspect of resilience, who were individually and collectively so generous and humble, going back to cultural humility. Each one of them were incredibly humble, incredibly open. And so, for me, I feel like that was such a huge, just psychologically safe space.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's such a great question. I remember I was in some class, and like the focus of the class was, we were talking about self-care, and one of my friends was here and they were listening, and I was like, this is a doctoral program talking about self-care? And it's like, yeah, because it's important. Like, and I think we take it for granted, right? But we don't take care of ourselves because we're so focused on pouring into other people that we don't take care of ourselves. So like, we might have all these things on the wall and things that we do, but if we don't do them, we're not taking care of ourselves. I finally went for a walk this morning outside, and I said I was going to walk every morning for like the last 6 months. And I did it today, and I was like, oh my God, this is so great. I should do this every morning while I'm like listening to something. And I was like, what took me so long? And it's like, just do it, girl. Just do it. And so great question. I love that. And so we ended the immersion program in New York. Okay. It was so much fun. We didn't actually get to go to Guyana, but we got to go to Little Guyana in New York. And oh my gosh. Okay. I have new friends. I have new family. I was like, dancing with the dude on stilts. Like, it was like an amazing time. Like, I'm like, where am I? Right. And we went to the Brooklyn Children's Museum, and I was like, who would have known? Like, we out there line dancing, at 9:00 in the morning. It was wonderful. So if you could tell us a little bit about like how that even came to pass, because I met family members, and like, we friends now. I feel like, they're like, when you coming back? And I'm like, you tell me and I'll be here. So tell us a little bit about how that even came to pass. And
yeah, sure. So we figured out the Zoom workshop piece of it, the virtual workshop piece of it, but and that qualifies for the service learning part of the course. But the cultural immersion part of the course was a big question mark. So at one point I thought, like, maybe I'll just have them over to my house and we'll just like make curry, and that will be sufficient culturally immersive. So in conversations with both Kevin and Gabrielle Palmer, Gabby is a school psychologist who runs WJC's mentoring programs, and she's of Guyanese heritage. I found out about this place called Little Guyana that I had no clue existed in Queens, New York, and it was fantastic. It has a lot of Guyanese restaurants. So if you're into Guyanese food, that is the place to be. So Gabby was really instrumental in helping to also really plan some of that trip, and I'm so grateful to her. And obviously we got a chance to meet her mom, who is Guyanese, left Guyana about 30 years ago, and just so enjoyed being able to educate us about Guyanese food and Guyanese culture. And I learned so much from her about Guyanese foods that I had never heard of. So she was just fantastic. So I'm really grateful that she was able to participate, as well as other family members. So it was a really, really fun trip. I just was like on such a high, and it was fascinating because Lavanya, at one point, I think you said, I've never done so many things in one day in so many different places, because we hit 4 boroughs in New York in a day. And actually we also, Lavanya and I, dropping you home, Kevin, got to the Bronx. So really it's 5 boroughs. So that was fantastic. But it was really such, and it was beyond my expectations of what that time would be like. And I just so enjoyed myself. So thank you guys so much. It was such a pleasure being with you there.
I can literally just echo all of that. And the only borough that we missed is Staten Island, but nobody really goes there.
We need a ferry to go there.
Right, we need a ferry. I don't even know where to begin. It was such an amazing experience overall. I felt so happy overall to be amongst people celebrating and learning and immersing themselves in Guyanese culture amongst each other. It just felt so welcoming, and it's one of the only times, or one of the most recent times, that I've been around so many Guyanese, especially folks that aren't my family members. So it felt really, it was just an amazing experience to be around other Guyanese and to be seen, to be known that I'm part of this community and this is part of my background, was just so wonderful to be a part of. I'm thinking back to Lavanya eating Guyanese fried rice and how happy she was trying Guyanese fried rice. She had no idea what it was prior to ordering it. But, Gabrielle's mom provided some information about what it is, what's in this fried rice. And then I could see Lavanya trying it and really just like on another level of happiness, which was honestly amazing. So I have that in my memory somewhere in my brain.
You're welcome.
Of you trying.
So sorry, Kevin.
Oh no, go ahead, Dr. Cort.
No, you just made me have a flashback of us walking in this really hot sun with Lavanya's shoes melting.
Latoya, listen. So there's multiple restaurants, I guess, with the same name.
Okay.
We parallel park really nicely. You know what I'm saying? And then
That's the New York way. That's the New York way.
Right?
That's the New York way.
So then we get out, then we get to the restaurant, and we're like, this is not the right one. And so we're like, listen, we're not parking again. How far is the other one? 22 minutes. Oh, no problem. We can do that. Everyone in the group is down. We're gonna walk. I put my watch on. We're gonna get some steps in. We're gonna get our exercise in. 45 minutes later. Okay. My shoes is melted. My body was sore. I probably got a tan. I couldn't breathe.
No sunscreen.
No sunscreen. Listen.
Oh my God, it was so hot. But Latoya, I was saying to them, like, really, this is like we're in Guyana, because the sun in Guyana is like right here.
Right.
So it was an immersion experience, the heat in New York City. So it worked.
We had the full experience like we was there. Okay? Like full experience. The food, amazing. And so the crazy thing is you look into the menu, it's like, oh, this is like Caribbean food or this is Chinese food. No, when you taste it, completely different. The chicken, it was a whole nother level of fried. I ain't never tasted fried chicken like that before. Like, it was crunchy and soft on the inside, and the rice, oh my gosh. I came back and started Googling Guyana restaurants in my neighborhood because I'm like, I'm gonna have to go to DC and get it. But I need some of that fried chicken. Matter of fact, I might go tonight and give me some of that. So
yeah, it cures COVID, by the way. I don't know if we mentioned that.
I hope they DoorDash. Let me. I need them to save me today. Oh my God. Oh my God. Latoya, did you have any final thoughts or questions?
So I think I want to leave the final word to you, Lavanya, as someone who has really tried to apply all the things that you're learning within the area of concentration to the OLP kind of curriculum and coursework and area of practice. How has being in the African Caribbean immersion course changed / enhanced your perspective of what it means to be culturally I think I love Dr. Cort and Kevin's understanding of cultural humility. And I'm gonna steal that, take it with me. I appreciate you both. Thank you. But Lavanya, can you tell us what you would describe it as? How has the journey been, I guess, as you're trying to apply this to the OLP world?
That's such a great question. So like even before I signed up for William James College, I went to the Bahamas and I'm like talking to all the people because we're gonna make friends, right? And I'm gonna be international one day. So I'm like,
I know that wherever you go, you're gonna make a friend. Yes, I know. Yes, I know.
Well, I'm talking to them and they're just like talking about how like they want to get off the island, how they feel stuck. And I'm like, but you can see through your water. Like, you can see the sand 10 feet down. I'm confused. Why in the world would you want to leave this place? Your food is amazing. Y'all move slow. Ain't nobody in no rush. Why would you want to go to the U.S. where everybody mean? Y'all friendly? What are you talking about? So I'm like having all these conversations with people and they're like their mindset. And a lot of them were the younger ones because they're seeing on social media all these different things. And the older ones is like, no, they need to appreciate the land. And like, we farm and we do all these different things. But they were like, that mentally they were, in this emotionally negative place. And so when I came to the program and I recognized that they had it, I'm like, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to figure out how to connect this leadership, right? Like, because the leadership is the people that actually can make and change the rules and policies, and right. I'm going to kind of get some leadership, and then I'm going to help these people change the law so that there can be a different level of freedom to move around these different islands. Because they're like, I can go to other islands, but mine is prettier than theirs. Why would I go to theirs? And I'm like, that makes so much sense, right? So, being a part of this program, I recognize that I was not even culturally humble, right? Like I'm thinking I'm sensitive and I'm, I want the best for you, but I had such a limited knowledge of just the amount of, even in the same culture, you think differently. You're raised.
Yes.
And so it's really just being about connected to that person. And when you connect the people to leadership, you have to, even in organizationals, even though we have large organizations, you can't forget about the individual person, because if you start grouping people together, you're gonna miss something. You're gonna miss somebody. And so it's from top down. So when you teach the people how to connect individually, the supervisor that only has 8 people is culturally humble with those 8 people. And so the director doesn't have to be, because they've taught the leadership how, and so it trickles down, right? And so we got to infiltrate the system at the top. And so I haven't completely figured it out all yet, but I got a year left. And I told that before, like I'm gonna figure out how to, stay here, because I still need more education myself. I haven't figured it out. And since I haven't figured it out, I can't leave yet. So I don't know if that answered your question, Latoya. I'm not sure.
No, I think you did. I think I think what I heard you say, and Kevin and Dr. Cort, feel free to jump in, but I think I heard you say that as individuals, we should start at home with our own cultural humility, right? Our own cultural understanding. And in trying to connect with other folks, you should probably check yourself first. And that makes perfect sense to me as we move as leaders, as allies, as, support people to other organizations, as coaches of leaders, all these roles that folks within our program and the OLP program hold. Yeah, we must first, be clued into our own shortfalls.
That's exactly what I said. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Summing that up, I appreciate that. Dr. Cort, Kevin, did either one of you have anything else that you wanted to say? We really appreciate you guys being here, but anything you want to say as we close?
Sure. Thank you so much for being so generous and giving us an opportunity to reflect and share about this experience, which has been a really, really important one. I also wanted to just shout out a couple more people, including Dr. Anika Williams, who was fantastic. Dr. Williams is a nationally renowned urologist who also does a lot of amazing work around habits of positivity. And given that we're talking about depression, talking about suicide, it was really, really, really necessary for us to have someone who is a scholar in issues of compassion, self-compassion, and ways in which we need to act and think that in ways that help us feel better. So Dr. Williams presented on the last day of the workshop, and it was just so phenomenal. And then we also, I mentioned before, we had a number of moderators, DJ King, Melissa Mitchell, and Anna Houston, who were really quite phenomenal and generously giving up their time and being really invested, right? Not just showing up, but really invested in the work that we were doing and the people that we were serving. So I'm just so lucky and blessed by the fact that I had such a fantastic opportunity to work with all of you. So thank you, Lavanya. Thank you, Kevin, Christine, Erica, Olivia. It was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, just echoing that. Thank you so much, Lavanya and Latoya, as well, for putting the spotlight on Guyanese culture and this immersion course itself. Oftentimes, I think Guyana is invisible for some people. They have not heard about it. So we really appreciate this opportunity for letting us talk about this experience and Guyanese culture.
Absolutely. We about to be international. Okay.
Latoya, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you both. Kevin, Dr. Cort, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Keep in touch, Lavanya.
I will.